Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Go Home Show podcast, brought to you by Sporth, your one-stop shop for all things professional wrestling, with weekly chats with WWE superstars, all the news you might have missed from the previous 7 days, and a look back at some of the most infamous moments in history. I am your host for this week, Chris Anderson, and joining me are two very special co-hosts. Firstly, the most cynical man in professional wrestling. He once described Michaels versus Taker as just, it was all right, and isn't yet sold on The Rock as a movie star. We know him as the Crusher. It's Mr. Michael Henson. Crush, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, but I'd like to point out that the two previous facts are not true whatsoever, and Chris is a liar and has no proof, so good luck with that, Christopher.
We live in a world of alternative facts, so I can say what I want. Next up is a man who might be the only person in the world to know every single one of Jericho's 1,004 holds. A real nostalgia hunter when it comes to the squared circle, Mr. Elliott Ames. Elliott, how are we doing?
I'm doing good, thank you, brother.
Good to hear it. I'm glad that you agree with everything I've just said, unlike Crush, who's trying to be difficult within 1 minute of starting this podcast. And in this podcast, we are starting big, and I mean limitless big. We have NXT Champion Keith Lee joining us. I have no clue why he's made this terrible business decision, but for some reason, he has decided to speak to us, and we're very excited to be doing so. We're also going to be chatting about the best bits of the last 7 days and discussing what is, in our opinion, the greatest turn in wrestling history. Now, fortunately for all of those who are concerned, I am not the usual host. We actually have a full-time host with at least a modicum of talent. Unfortunately for us, he is currently lost in parts unknown this week, but we have got him to send in a quick message to introduce himself. Will Brazier, you have 20 seconds. Go.
Hi guys, sorry I can't be with you this week. My name's Will Brazier. I'll normally be on the Go Home podcast, but this week I'm in Greece.
Thank you, Will. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure that you give us a like and comment with your thoughts on what's happened across the past week. And if you're listening wherever you get your podcast, leave us a nice 5-star review and a comment about who you'd like to see us interview next. Let's dive straight into the last 7 days with 5 things you might have missed. And I'm going to start off very simply with seeing someone who is now officially a WWE superstar pay his dues for the week. This is the segment with Dominic Mysterio, Seth Rollins, and Buddy Murphy. Crush, what were your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I love this segment. It's the storyline has been fantastic with Dominic Mysterio. Like, even when he was doing stuff with Brock Lesnar, like, he's been very good, and now he's properly into WWE. We saw last week he was attacking Seth Rollins and Buddy Murphy weapons, and now the tables have officially turned. They tied him up in the ropes and went to town with kendo sticks. And if you're listening to the podcast, go and check out our Twitter, Go Home Show Pod, with images of how Dominic was after that attack. And if you're watching us on YouTube, this is what it looked like.
Crush, for the first week, that was seamless. I've never been prouder of you. As a podcast host, that was incredible. Moving on to another foreign object introduced into a wrestling segment. This was the announcement of Keith Lee and Karrion Kross making it official that they will have a title match at NXT TakeOver 30. But then, in a twist, it turns out Karrion Kross can control fire, as if fireball erupted from the contract that he'd just signed. What were your thoughts on this, Elliott?
It's just great ridiculousness, isn't it? Like, it just adds so much to the supernatural elements of the character. Ever since he came in with that first entrance, like the week after WrestleMania, I've been hooked on Karrion Kross. I just want to see more spookish stuff like this. Keep going crazy with it. It's what makes NXT really fun.
And on top of that, it wasn't the only championship match made official this week. We have Lee versus Kross at NXT TakeOver, but we also have Apollo Crews versus MVP for the US title. We have The Fiend against the monster Braun Strowman. And we also have Asuka versus Sasha for the Raw Women's title match. I'm going to very quickly say that the match between Asuka and Bayley for Asuka to essentially qualify for the championship match might be one of the best TV matches we've seen in a long time. This was really, really good. If you haven't seen it, go check it out, or even if it's just like the highlights on WWE's YouTube, or check it out on the network. It's dead good. It's well worth the time. But we are going to very quickly move away from WWE into the world of AEW. AEW announced a new signing this week, who was part of the TNT Championship match. This was Mike Chioda, former referee of WWE. I'm going to dive in on this one because I don't like to mention it, but I am a professional wrestler.
I wish you'd mentioned it before. I'd have loved to have heard that before,
Yeah.
Chris,
Yeah, that's a revelation to me.
It is. I know. I don't like to go on about it. But what I was going to, before I was rudely interrupted by my two co-hosts, I think one of the most underrated parts of any wrestling show is the referees. They are very much the glue that holds the show together. And I think especially at a TV level, when you've got a company or a promotion that is new to TV, having someone with all the experience of Mike Chioda to hold all that together and be the glue in the middle, I think is a very, very, very good signing. Elliot, what are your thoughts?
I have to agree. I think he's probably one of the better signings they've made from the WWE ilk over the past, year is it or so since AEW has been going? I mean, he's the most iconic referee from my generation growing up. I loved seeing him on SmackDown. He just sells everything really well. Like, he doesn't seem like he reminds me of like a classic football referee. He just doesn't take any BS from anyone. So, yeah, I think it's a really good signing. Adds a bit of legitimacy. And that's all AEW are trying to do right now. Just keep making themselves look more legit. And week by week, it's starting to get there, really.
Absolutely. I very, very much agree. And then, finally, of our 5 things you may have missed this week, we're going to turn to what I think was probably the best segment of the week if we don't include R-Truth regaining the 24/7 title, dressed up as a ninja. But after that, Orton turning on Ric Flair was potentially one of the best. It adds such another layer to his feud versus Drew McIntyre. I was really impressed. Crush, you are the most cynical man in professional wrestling. What did you think?
No, I love this, yeah. I've loved Ric Flair for many, many years. I fortunately got to meet him back in January, though, when BT Sport launched their WWE contract. So, yeah, that was one of my career highlights when I met him. But, yeah, he's played his role so well. And it's not really a heel turn, but it's a healer turn, as we spoke about before. But, yeah, having, like, Drew coming out afterwards, it's this SummerSlam match is going to be incredible. I just hope Drew retains.
Yeah, so in fact, let's very quickly go into that. What do we think? Do we think Drew retains at SummerSlam?
No, I don't. I think that they're going to give Randy another long title shot, and Drew is going to eventually win the title back either at Royal Rumble or at WrestleMania when crowds are allowed in. Because as bad as 2020 has been as a year, one of the worst moments for me as a wrestling fan was not seeing Drew get that pop. The first British world champion in WWE. He's absolutely earned it. He's been on an incredible journey. And for no one to be in the arena, it did suck a bit away from the moment. It was still a great moment. Absolutely demolished Brock. And I think because they're booking him in that way of being the strong super babyface at the moment, I think that's just really simple storytelling that they'll go with.
Just to interject here, I think that I agree with Elliot. I think he might drop it. Not that I want him to, because obviously first British champion and all that. But Ric Flair said in one of his promos, either this week or last week, he wants Randy Orton to beat his record rather than John Cena's record. So imagine if it gets down to when he's about to break it and Ric Flair cost him. That would be great long-term storytelling because he's on 13 title wins at the moment. So,
I believe so, yeah. No, I like that a lot. So, we have the singular segment of Randy Orton turning on Ric Flair, as I think we'll call it our segment of the week. But is it the greatest turn in wrestling history? We're now going to move on to a segment called Convince Me. All 3 of us have gone away and thought of what we think our best turn in the history of the squared circle is. We're now going to try and convince each other on why our opinion is correct and why we should be right. But we also want to hear from you. Do you agree with us or do you have your own thoughts? So I'm going to go first, mainly because I'm the host this week and I get to do whatever I want. So, in my opinion, the greatest turn in wrestling history is the classic Shawn Michaels turning on Marty Jannetty. Although I will caveat this and say, actually, it was Marty Jannetty, the coward, running away from Shawn Michaels. We all know that is true, but that's what it is. What I really like about this turn, actually, is it's what I don't think a lot of people know is it's actually built in real life. And that Jannetty and Michaels were in backstage were starting to split up. They didn't really want to work with each other anymore. There's a lot of he said, she said about why that was. There was a legitimate fight that apparently was instigated by Roddy Piper. So they kind of, after all this back and forward, the WWF, as it was at the time, had decided they were going to break them up. Any time that real life integrates with wrestling, that for me is a winner. It works so well on so many different levels. I think, especially now, because the world is a much more open place, social media just kind of reveals everything. There isn't that ability to kind of separate outside from the inside of the wrestling world. But anytime that real life comes in and makes such an explosion, it will always really resonate with me. And then the fact that I think he would have been a star anyway because he is so ridiculously talented, but it was the catalyst of what sent Shawn Michaels to become the Heartbreak Kid, to become everything that happened in the following 20 years or however long it's been. I don't think you can find a better turn than Shawn Michaels, Marty Jannetty, the Rockers breaking up. However, I appreciate there are two other opinions here that we have to hear before we decide they are wrong. So, firstly, I will go to Elliott. Elliott, what is the greatest turn in wrestling history?
Well, you see, my choice is the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, which is the double turn, because I'm going double trouble here, of Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, Shawn Michaels, obviously he won the WWE title at WrestleMania 12 against Bret Hart. In kayfabe, Bret Hart is, very upset about the fact he's lost the title, so he goes away, and he just feels like he's not up to the standards that he'd brought in the years prior. In reality, he's gone away and done some acting roles, and also got some big offers from WCW. He doesn't come back till about, I think, September or October later that year, and he says, he wants to get these opportunities. He wants to get the WWE Championship back. Stone Cold Steve Austin just rocks up as a guy taking absolutely no BS and keeps on saying, you're whining, you're complaining, you say you're the best in the world, you can't stop it. We then go to the Royal Rumble, where Stone Cold Steve Austin wins illegitimately. He gets knocked out by Bret, refs don't see it, he then comes on in, and I think he chucked out, it was Vader, Undertaker, and Bret to then win the whole Royal Rumble. But obviously, it's illegitimate because the referees didn't see it. Goes to a fatal four-way. Bret wins the title. Happy ending. He's finally reached the top of the mountain. He then has a match the next week against Sid, and Stone Cold costs him the belt. They then have another match, and then it's revealed that whoever wins the title is going to defend it against their respected opponent at Mania. And ironically, Stone Cold trying to come in and save the title and keep it on Bret so he can fight for it at Mania. Doesn't happen. Undertaker ends up coming in and costs Bret the match, and then we get into this amazing match. For me, this is absolutely fantastic, purely because when you watch it, you can tell that Stone Cold everybody likes him. The fans like him, but as a heel, they still boo him. He's got maybe like 50% cheers at this point. The pop for Bret, though, is ridiculous. He is on top of the world. You can tell he's the top star going into it. They turned it into a submission match. Originally, it was meant to be no holds barred, but because of the addition, allegedly, because of Ken Shamrock as a special guest referee and his UFC legitimacy, they decided, all right, we'll do it as submission because, he makes people tap out for a living. And the storytelling in this is absolutely great. Bret keeps on targeting the leg, and they keep trying to put in sharpshooters on each other. And then it gets to that final moment where Bret gets the sharpshooter in. He's been targeting that leg the entire match, and Stone Cold refuses to tap. He's got blood pouring down him because he got knocked out on the ring posts outside. And it's just an amazing visual where Bret ends up winning, but this guy who's been absolutely ruining his life for the past 6 months hasn't actually lost to him. He just happened to he didn't give up. So he starts beating the crap out of him, and the crowd starts booing. They start getting angry. And Bret Hart goes in as the biggest hero in the WWE and leaves as the biggest villain, which leads to him being his anti-American character. He ends up reforming the Hart Foundation, and that then leads to the Montreal Screwjob and everything else. And alongside, we have Stone Cold Steve Austin become the biggest star in wrestling history. So for me, that is the best, because it's a double turn and it changed the trajectory of the entire wrestling industry as a result.
That is the most in-depth recap of a single turn I've ever heard. But you do make a very good point, which is it did create two very legitimate stars in Bret Hart and Stone Cold. And when we lead on to, like you said, the Montreal Screwjob, where
Bret screwed Bret.
I still don't agree with you. You're still wrong, but you've put a very good case forward. Crush, you have the floor. Why are both myself, the man who made the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, and Elliott, the man who made Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin, why are we wrong?
So you've made two very, very good points. Elliott, obviously better than Chris, but I take your explanations and I raise you. And two segments you haven't mentioned so far, which I'm now going to mention, is Kevin Owens turning on Chris Jericho at the Festival of Friendship, which is also a throwback to when Jericho turned on Shawn Michaels and rammed his head through the TV. I think that was 2006. And also Rollins turning on the Shield, which I can't believe that even escaped any mention before, Chris. Obviously, we need Will back sooner rather than later.
Get on with it.
But yes, my point is, going all the way back to 2005, 15 years ago, wow, and Batista turning on Triple H. So let me set some context here. We love a good context here at the Go Home Show pod. Batista wins the 2005 Royal Rumble, and it is that Royal Rumble where Batista and John Cena both touch the floor at the same time. Vince McMahon powers out, legitimately tearing both of his quads, and barks instructions while sitting in the ring, and no one has a clue what's going on. Batista obviously then wins from a spine buster and throwing Cena out. And fast forward, here, Batista helps Triple H retain in the February, I think, and then Batista is now deciding which champion to face at WrestleMania 21. So on the SmackDown side, you've got JBL holding the WWE Championship, and on the Raw side, you've got fellow Evolution member and World Heavyweight Champion Triple H. So we're in the ring. Ric Flair's there, Triple H is there, Evolution have come out as one. Eric Bischoff and Teddy Long are the general managers trying to persuade Batista to go for their belt. And they all do this talking, and it gets to it, and Batista throws the Raw contract down. He holds the SmackDown contract up. And this is where it gets good. He gives Triple H the thumbs up, which is obviously a throwback to SummerSlam 2004 when Randy Orton got kicked out of Evolution. And you see Triple H and Ric Flair, they're giving it the double thumbs up, they're all delighted. And then it's just the slow turn of the thumb, thumbs down. Batista attacks Flair, throws him out the ring. He then powerbombs Triple H through the table and signs the contract, and the heavyweight title match for WrestleMania 21 is confirmed, which Batista obviously goes on to win his first ever heavyweight title. And therefore, that is why I believe that is the greatest turn in WWE history.
So we have three very different options. We have the Rockers, Shawn Michaels, Marty Jannetty, a barbershop window. We have Elliott with Bret Hart and Stone Cold in probably the biggest double turn in the history of wrestling. And we have Crushers, Batista, Triple H, the disillusion of Evolution. Which is your favourite? We'll have a poll on our Twitter, which is, Crush, what is our Twitter?
At Go Home Show Pod.
Seamless. Pick on the poll or suggest your own. Is it the Shield breaking up? Is it Jericho versus KO at the Festival of Friendship? Or are there any that we have missed? Let us know what you think. And we will reveal who won this week's episode of Convince Me on next week's episode of the Go Home Show. But now SummerSlam is just around the corner, and how better to enjoy one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year than with the company of some fresh and delicious beer from all over the globe. In this crazy English heat, there's no need to worry about heading to the shops to stock up ahead of SummerSlam. Beer 52 will bring the beer to you. They're offering a free case of 8 craft beers sourced and curated from the best breweries on the planet. All you need to do is go to www.beer52.com/sporf and cover $5.95 for postage. Each case is delivered direct to your doorstep, so no need to leave the house. Looking to stock up? This is your chance. Beer 52 is the world's most popular craft beer discovery club with over 150,000 is that 150,000 members? Shout
Insane.
out Beer 52. That's incredible. 150,000 members that they send a brand new case of beer to every month. Each month's case has a different theme. Past themes have included beer from New Zealand, South Africa, Korea, and all over the USA and Europe. So that is beer52.com. That's the word beer. Then the numbers 5, the number 2.com/sporf. SPORF. For Freddie, for Foxtrot, for free beers. Lads, we just did our first ever ad read. We are officially a real podcast. I've never been more proud of it. However, we move on to our next segment, which has the working title of Room 101. Every week, a different member of the panel will bring with them one thing from the world of wrestling that they'd like to get rid of forever. They'll present it to the group, and if it enters Room 101, it is gone. If not, we have to continue living with it for the rest of time. Each week, we'll update the list of what's gone in and what hasn't. This week, I will be deciding whether or not it enters Room 101. Elliott, you have the floor for the first ever episode of Wrestling Room 101. What would you like rid of?
Well, for the first episode, I'm going to put Crush under the bus because I know he probably agrees with me on this. It is the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Now, not the match itself, the pay-per-view itself. I'm someone who doesn't really agree with the whole idea of setting a pay-per-view around like one individual match, unless it's a certain event like the Royal Rumble or Survivor Series, but also their mainstays. They've been around for a very long time. For me, the Money in the Bank ladder match is a WrestleMania match. Because every time you put ladders and it opens up WrestleMania, it's going to be amazing. It's always the best way to open a show. And for me also, it means that you don't have to relegate a load of mid-carders and upcoming talent and just shove them in the Andre the Giant Battle Royale on the pre-show. You can put them in the Money in the Bank ladder match and actually build a load of different storylines. You can allude to the idea of building new stars. You should be treating WrestleMania as your season finale anyway, so why not have someone potentially be the surprise package, the guy who might end up cashing in, and also it could absolutely bring a load of hijinks at the end of Mania. If there's been a long-term rivalry between a person who's in the main event and a person in the Money in the Bank ladder match, we saw it with the Heist of the Century, it's absolutely fantastic. Why not give that opportunity every year? And I say that as someone who enjoyed this year's hijinks. I thought the Money in the Bank pay-per-view was pretty fun. I liked how they included both the women's and men's matches going on at the same time. But I still think it has that magic at WrestleMania. So for me, I would say put into Room 101, the Money in the Bank pay-per-view.
Crush, so you agree with this, I assume?
No. As a WWE Hall of Famer once said, wrong. I don't agree with that. Whilst I agree with part of it, of having the ladder match to open WrestleMania, see WrestleMania 32 when Zack Ryder won the Intercontinental title and then that pop that it had, I think we need the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. It sets up, like, look at this year when you said it had both matches going on at the same time. Yeah, it probably won't be like that every year, but having that sort of showcase pay-per-view where it's solely focused on the main event, you know what is coming, it gives its own sort of standing to the winner of that show. Like, and if you look back in previous years when Dolph Ziggler won it, like all the hysteria around that, and then he went and cashed in on Alberto Del Rio, it comes from that special pay-per-view. And from that night, they are known as the Money in the Bank holder until whenever they decide to cash it in. It could be within an hour like Kane did, or it could be like Rollins way right to WrestleMania to do that. But if you have it on WrestleMania, yeah, you can cash it in at the same night, but it's going to be expected on that same night then. Whereas Money in the Bank, it's in July, June, and then they've got this moments and months of uncertainty of when that person's going to cash in. Plus, you're missing out on some of the great matches in recent years in that Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Let me take you back to 2011, two that stand out. You have Randy Orton against Christian. It's their series of matches. If Orton loses via disqualification, he loses the title. Christian spits at Orton. Orton low blows him Christian wins the title and then gets 2 RKOs through the announcers table. That same pay-per-view, this is the same night, Elliot, the same night, as well as the Money in the Bank ladder match. This is 2 incredible matches. CM Punk versus John Cena. That incredible, incredible ending where CM Punk leaves WWE at midnight as the champion, and then the whole follow-on story from that. 2012, Daniel Bryan against CM Punk. AJ Lee, special guest referee. That started Team Hell No. So if you get rid of that pay-per-view, Team Hell No never gets created. CM Punk and John Cena don't have that ending. You can wait for your point, Elliot. I'm still on. I'm still going. We go in 3 years later. We're on 2015 now. It's Cena versus Kevin Owens. We had the match early in the year, Kevin Owens' first ever main roster match, Elimination Chamber, I believe it was, when it was US champ versus NXT champ. Like, you don't get that if we get rid of the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. And then also later that night, Rollins versus Ambrose in a ladder match for the title. Why would you want to get rid of any of them?
My argument to that would be that those moments, most of them could happen at any other pay-per-view after WrestleMania to fit with those storylines. And all those moments, most of them, don't actually involve the Money in the Bank ladder match either. They're all involving the fact that there's a main event going on afterwards. In fact, it's a pay-per-view where the main event isn't even the Money in the Bank ladder match in most cases. It was the case this year, but most years, it's, as you say, it was Punk versus Cena. For me, it kind of just, it undermines the match a little bit. I think the glamour and spectacle of WrestleMania adds a lot more weight to it. So,
but at the same time, having the main event as the Money in the Bank ladder match adds so much prestigious to that match, and you have that months of uncertainty, weeks of uncertainty, hours of uncertainty until that person then cashes in. Whereas if, for example, say at WrestleMania next year, Keith Lee, who's coming up later in the podcast, wins Money in the Bank, he's going to be cashing in that night. Like having that sort of uncertainty and surprise for when they're going to cash in, and that pop, like see when Ziggler came out, like when Sheamus was 5:15 after Reigns won the title, like having that is what makes Money in the Bank. If you have it at the same night as WrestleMania, it's like a flat balloon.
Gents, I'm going to jump in here because, firstly, I'm very aware you could both go for hours on this subject. And unfortunately, firstly, we all have jobs we need to go back to. And secondly, there is a time limit on this. So I am going to make my decision. I think it is a very, very good point. I think there's a very, very good point. And there is a separate issue between the Money in the Bank match and the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. I think also on Crush's side, there are some moments, both involving the Money in the Bank match, but also the pay-per-view itself, which are like key focal points in WWE history. I mean, we talk about, for example, the one that always stands out to me more than CM Punk versus John Cena is Dean Ambrose cashing in on the night against Seth Rollins after he just beat Roman. Like anything, I love the Shield, all in on the Shield. Anything that ties all 3 pieces of the Shield together will always have a special place in my heart.
imagine that at WrestleMania, though. Imagine that at WrestleMania.
Very true. But, I mean, there's been Money in the Bank moments at WrestleMania, like the heist, that didn't need the Money in the Bank match to have been earlier that day. Like, that show was strong enough on its own. It didn't need to be brought in with that. So, my decision as the temporary host of the Go Home Show podcast, I am saying that the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, known as the 5th major pay-per-view, I might add, does not enter Wrestling Room 101. However...
Thank you, Chris. Justice has been served.
Crush, no one likes smug. I will change my decision. Just because you met The Undertaker once and went to one WrestleMania. Not that you ever mention it. However, I throw it out to you, the Go Home Show podcast audience. What do you think? Should Money in the Bank, the pay-per-view, not the match, the pay-per-view, should it enter Wrestling's Room 101? Should we move the match to the start of WrestleMania? Or should we keep the 5th major pay-per-view? Elliot, you can shake your head. You know I'm right. The 5th major pay-per-view in the WWE calendar. Let us know what you think. Let us know on Twitter at Go Home Show Pod. Let us know in the comments section if you're on YouTube. Tell us what you think. Do you agree with Elliot? It should be gone. Do you agree with Crush and myself? It should stay.
So every week, the team is going to go head-to-head in a quick quiz format based around a specific topic. For example, the topic could be hardcore champions, and each member of the team has to say how many can name. And it's almost bidding for a shot at naming them. Chris might say he can name 5. If Will's here, he might say he can name 6. But then Elliott goes, you know what? You two are stupid. I can name 7. And then he's got the chance to win for that day. So the rules are quite simple. And this week's topic is...
I'm going to jump in very quickly and say, I've just realised, this is week 1. All right, I get thrown at the deep end as host. And then you put me one-on-one against the man who we previously said knows everything about wrestling and can name every hold in Chris Jericho. I swear to God, if this is name all the holds on Chris Jericho's 1004 list of holds, Crush, I'm gone.
Yeah, but Chris, you're a wrestler, so you should know.
Yeah.
Do you want to plug your Twitter, plug your Twitter and what you are, Synergy, at this moment in time?
At the Anderson Daniels, book us at Synergy Faction on the Instagram. I don't think we're on Twitter as a faction, just book us. When wrestling gets back, we need the money. Buy our t-shirts. synergyshop.bigcartel.com.
And this week's topic is, how many types of WWE matches can you name? So you've got just 10 seconds to think.
I'm typing down my list before anyone accuses me of cheating.
Cool. So we've got 10 seconds. So throwing out to the audience, you can play along at this time. How many types of WWE matches can you name? Whether it be speciality type of matches from pay-per-views, just normal matches, anything you want. And Chris, because you look like you're cheating, how many can you name?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to go with 14.
Oh, we're starting big. Elliott, coming across to you, how many can you name?
I'll say 15.
Oh, Chris, back to you. Can we have a 16? 16, going once.
Oh,
going twice.
Yeah, I'll have it. I'll have 16.
Elliott, back to you. Can you name 17, yes or no?
Yes.
Oh,
I think I could.
Go on then, 17.
17.
17.
Here we go. Let me get my notes ready. Elliott, in 3, 2, 1. Name 17 types of WWE matches.
No disqualification, Hell in a Cell, Steel Cage, strap match, Judy Bagwell on a pole match, Fatal 4-Way, Fatal 5-Way, chairs match, tables match, ladder match, Money in the Bank ladder match, tables, ladders and chairs match, hardcore match, no holds barred, Iron Man match. I might have had no holds barred before. Eliminate.
2 more to go.
20 seconds.
Match.
There we go. There's 17.
Oh, yes.
Put my hand up here. One of those was incorrect.
What was incorrect?
So I want to clear up. If he's incorrect, does he lose?
Yes.
Judy Bagwell was not on a pole. Judy Bagwell was on a forklift.
Let's have a look. Judy Bagwell.
Yeah, if everyone calls it that, you know.
I don't make the rules. I didn't make the match.
I mean, to be fair,
I'll prove it.
Both have been used. It's both
Buff
Bagwell versus Canyon. Judy Bagwell on a pole match in Newwood Rising 2000, but then also it's stated as a Judy Bagwell on a forklift match, but it's officially under the bracket of object on a pole match. So I am giving Elliott the point.
Yes.
Elliott, you win with 17 names, 17 types of WWE matches named, and you'll be hosting next week's segment. How did you get along at home? Did I count right? Because potentially I might not have, so please feel to give me abuse on Twitter, at GoHomeShowPod. And yeah, Elliott, you'll be hosting the segment next week.
Fantastic.
I cannot believe I've lost on a match that centered around a member of American Males. I cannot believe it.
If I'm being honest, I completely blagged that. I didn't think I'd get 17. I was hoping you go to like 18 or 20.
It was, so I had not cheated, but I'd bent the rules a little bit. On my list, I had a singles match. Didn't get mentioned, just a singles match. Tag match. Triple threat match. Triple threat tag match. Fatal 4-Way tag match. 5-Way. Tornado tag was on there as well. 5-Way, 6-Way. Battle Royale, 4-man Battle Royale, 5-man Battle Royale, 6-man Battle Royale.
I didn't even say Royal Rumble.
Royal Rumble. We move on to the most exciting part of the podcast where you don't have to listen to myself, Elliot, or Crush ramble on about the world of wrestling.
You'll have to listen to me, but...
Well, I apologise for that. It's worth it. It is worth it because our guest is the current reigning and defending NXT champion, a former double champion. I would like to add, not the first ever double champion within NXT. Adam Cole did it first. He was North American and Tag Championship. Put some respect on the tag titles, please. He also featured at Survivor Series in 2019. He was in the 2020 Royal Rumble, joining our quiz host and third strongest member of the podcast, Michael Henson, is Mr. Keith Lee. Crush, over to you.
Thank you, Chris, for that introduction. I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by NXT champion, the limitless Keith Lee. How are you today, Keith?
Greetings and salutations, good sir. I'm quite lovely. How are you?
Good, I'm very good, thanks. You've got the Royal Rumble coming about, and there's this amazing moment where it's just you and Brock Lesnar in the ring. Everyone in that stadium's going absolutely mental. Twitter's blowing up. Can you tell us about working with Brock? Because I believe that him and Paul Heyman handpicked his opponents for the Royal Rumble.
Brock's somebody that he probably doesn't know it, but I've looked up to him since he debuted way back in the early 2000s, and someone that I've studied in terms of like movement, training style, just in terms of throwing human beings for a living. I relate a lot to him, I feel, and I think that that moment was something even more special than I realized at that time. I think that it is something that has kind of ingrained itself in the universe, the fans as a whole, because we're in July and people are still talking about this moment that was basically just us standing there. And I think that that's kind of a situation where the power of the moment itself and the two people in the ring tells a story on its own. So working with him, to say the least, was an honor, especially since I didn't know. I didn't find out I was even in the Rumble until a couple hours before the Rumble. So, yeah, you don't really know. I just kind of got dressed and seen what was going to happen. Noticed my number was what it was and realized that that guy was still in the ring. So it was going to be a thing where it's just like, okay, I need to go out there ready to fight. But when I got out there, the entire atmosphere of that whole dome changed. And I don't think that WWE expected 42,000 people to be all in on Keith Lee standing in the ring with Brock Lesnar. But I think that it's kind of shown them that I'm a tad different than anything they've had before. So it was very special. Very special.
And then after the Royal Rumble, did you have any interactions with Brock or Paul Heyman?
No, not at all. A matter of fact, that happened. And then that was it. I had to do backstage about, an opportunity that has passed. And I think I was so fired up. I mentioned like wanting to be number one next year or something. I don't remember what I said, but I did that interview and I went and got showered, changed, and then had to find my ride and I got lost and there was all sorts of things going on. So I had to get back to my hotel. So I didn't actually talk to anybody after that, except for the interview people. So that was it.
Now it's time for our Simply the Best feature with questions revolving all around the word best. So we're going to start with, who is the best male wrestler in the world now?
Ooh. Oh, that's difficult. It might be AJ Styles, man. The guy is just, in terms of versatility and being able to have just a ridiculous match with anyone, anywhere, at any given point in time. I don't know if there's a more capable guy in putting something out there that's just like will make you sit on the edge of your seat. He's brilliant.
Who is the best female wrestler in the world right now?
I'm going to give that to Asuka. Same situation, supremely versatile. She's just fluid like water in the ring, and I love watching her movement, the way she reacts to things, whether it's defensive or offensive. She's just, to me, she's an absolute monster in the ring, and I love watching her fight.
What's the best match that you've been in?
Probably me versus Kovic at TakeOver Portland, and that was I think that two guys knowing that it takes a lot to put either of us away. But there's also a manner of respect, a manner of wanting to make a statement for who we are and what we feel we are worth. And I think that TakeOver Portland made a lot of statements in terms of all of those subjects.
What's the best match that you've ever watched as a fan?
That's difficult. I'm gonna go with, this is the first thing that comes to mind. I'm gonna go with Shawn Michaels. I believe it was WrestleMania 21. And goodness gracious, you want to talk about a wrestling clinic from the beginning with the story of the match. To me personally, was the fact that Shawn Michaels was out wrestling this Olympic wrestler in the beginning and frustrated him to where this Olympic wrestler needed to lose his mind in order to turn the tides. But then it became this back and forth brawl, and Shawn got reckless with the diving and the German attempt where they're both hanging on for dear life. It's just a lot of story, a lot of drama, a lot of moments.
What is the best stadium or arena that you've wrestled in?
No, I mean, Royal Rumble in Houston, man. Just, I guess I can't really call that wrestling because I just went out there and fought, but just the intensity of, that was the biggest crowd I've been in front of, and it was awesome, like absolutely awesome.
Who is the best wrestler you've had a match against?
It might be Adam Cole right now. It might be Adam Cole. The guy is very different for being a smaller guy, but he's an extremely smart wrestler, intelligent, ring savvy, very aware of everything going on and just adjusts and adapts to everything. He reminds me of myself, but in smaller form, so the way that he adapts is different, but a very adaptive wrestler.
Who is the best wrestler you've never had a match against?
Kurt Angle, Cesaro, Rock, Roman, all the guys that it hasn't happened with one-on-one, all of them.
What has been the best moment of your career to date?
Winning both championships, without a doubt. And yeah, you can say, one-on-one with Roman at the end of Survivor Series is definitely an awesome moment. One-on-one with Brock Lesnar in the Rumble, very awesome moment. And both of them had the audience, which makes them really special. And it's still my own personal accomplishment of winning 2 championships in a winner-take-all match and being first time ever making history, solidifying my name in the books. Dude, it doesn't get bigger than that. It doesn't.
What's been the best gear that you've worn?
Oh, man. So I think the easy answer is the Black Lives Matter gear. But right up underneath it, dude, the old school Mewtwo gear, some of my favorite.
Who is your best friend in wrestling?
It's a guy, his name is Jerome Daniel Griffey. He is a professional wrestler on the Indies out of Texas. And, when it comes to entertainment, there's not a lot of people you can trust, but I've known this guy since 2008. And he is one of my 2 closest friends right now.
And finally, who has the best locker room banter in WWE?
Ooh. Oh, goodness. That's probably it's probably Shane Thorne. If I'm being honest, the guy's ridiculous and hilarious. He's an awesome dude. Awesome dude.
That was Keith Lee, reigning NXT champion, who will be taking on Karrion Kross in about 10 days, is it now? It's not far off. NXT TakeOver 30. What really, really surprised me, but I think the most interesting part I found of that whole thing was that Keith Lee entered the Royal Rumble. I'm going to say, well, it's the second biggest pay-per-view of the year, in my opinion. I prefer the Royal Rumble over SummerSlam just because of the Royal Rumble match. Arguably the most famous match of the year on the WWE calendar, against arguably the biggest wrestler in the world. Got the pop that we saw, bumped Brock Lesnar, which is something that not many people get to do, just on its own get to do, let alone have a full spot with him. And then as soon as he was eliminated, he took a shower and just went home without talking to anybody.
I mean, he did the interview and then went home, but it's still, I would have thought he'd have spoken to a few more wrestlers after that amazing moment in the ring in Houston, I think it was. Just to do an interview, get a shower, go home. It's kind of like everyday life to him, but he is the limitless Keith Lee. He does what he wants, and I wouldn't like to argue with him.
I'm very interested to see who goes over at TakeOver, because obviously there were rumours of there being a draft just after SummerSlam. The word kind of seeping out seems to be that the idea has been nixed, but it suggests that they're looking to shake it up slightly, with Pat McAfee and Adam Cole seeming to, like, there's something there. I don't think they'd just do let's get a former NFL player in just to have a match and go, and we'll leave it there kind of thing. So I think there's something there brewing with Adam Cole. I think with the big push they're giving to Karrion Kross, I don't see him losing at TakeOver. So I would be very interested to see whether we see Keith Lee and Adam Cole joining either the Raw or SmackDown rosters after SummerSlam. But we'll find out in 10 days. If you want to see the full version of that interview where Keith Lee talks about Survivor Series run, as we spoke about, working with Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, and about becoming NXT Double Champion, you can head over to our YouTube. It is Sporf Wrestling. Just search for Sporf Wrestling, and you'll find the full interview with NXT Champion Keith Lee on there. Some sadder news this week when it was announced that Jim Harris, also known as Kamala, the Ugandan giant, had passed away. He had been diagnosed with COVID-19 earlier in the week and died of cardiac arrest soon after. What many of us will remember Kamala for is his work with The Undertaker back in 1992. They had a match at SummerSlam at Wembley before going to Survivor Series in what was the first ever televised casket match. Jim Harris had struggled with health issues later in his life, being diagnosed with diabetes before losing both legs. However, his time in the WWF, we remembered for some incredible, incredible moments and some incredible work. We send our best wishes to all those affected. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you have enjoyed the show. We want to know your thoughts. What is the best wrestling turn in history? Could you have beaten Elliott in the quiz? Should the Money in the Bank pay-per-view go into Room 101? And who would you like to see us interview next? Thank you so much for listening. We hope you have enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app so you are the first to know when a new episode launches. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave us a review. It would help us so much. Let us know what you think. Don't forget to check out the full Keith Lee interview with our very own Crusher on the Sporf Wrestling YouTube. That is it from us. We'll see you next week. Let's go home.